take advantage of the side hustles and do it in a legal way. So we want to have a situation where we are having multiple streams of income, but if we're employed, we don't want to have a conflict of interest. So today we have wonderful speakers who are going to tell us how to go about starting that side hustle. And what's a side hustle in the first place? Sometimes that term is used loosely, and one might think they're having a side hustle, but it really isn't a side hustle. So we'll get to understand what qualifies to be a side hustle and how you can start one, how you can use your skills to make you extra income, and make sure that you're not colliding with your employer while you're doing that. So welcome again to this webinar, Beyond 8 to 5, Fostering Positive Side Hustle Conversations at Work. My name is Claire Munde, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I am an HR and digital media expert. I currently work as the digital editor at Citizen, and I do moderation and emceeing, among other things. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers and then give a little background and context for our webinar today, and then we will get this discussion underway. So now I'll start by introducing Nancy Mwabili. She is an HR strategist, an associate certified coach, a Geno certified EI practitioner, a certified PDA analyst, and author. I think you will explain to us a little bit more about what that entails, because when we hear the words EI and PDA, we don't want people to think that PDA is public displays of affection. I'm sure that's not what you are. So you'll explain to us a little bit more about what you do. And our other speaker for this evening is Martin Wafula, who is the managing director at Law Africa Publishing Limited. And he is a seasoned commercial and strategy leader and a mentor. So we're going to have a variety of discussions tonight, and it's really all around side hustles. We want to make sure we're making the most out of our side hustles. We want to understand the possible challenges that can come along with having a side hustle and how we can communicate. So if you're having that side hustle, how do you go about telling your colleagues about it? How do you make sure that you're not going to cause any friction within the workplace? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how to create a supportive culture around our side hustles, and then the legal considerations, which is very important because you don't want to end up messing your main job as you're focusing on your side hustle, and then you lose out on everything. So the legal considerations are very important when you're thinking of your side hustle. Then we'll also do some case studies, which I'm also looking forward to, and doing some role playing. So I want this to be an engaging webinar. So please share your experiences, even as our speakers talk. If you have an experience, we will have that opportunity for you to share your experiences, your challenges, your wins, and what we can learn from each other, because this is essentially what it is. We need to learn from each other so that when we go back to the field, we know what we can apply and what works, what doesn't work. And then after that, we will wrap up with some key learnings. So welcome again to this webinar, and we're looking forward to a very engaging session. And just as I said, it's become critical to have a side hustle. You know, they say that it's not wise to have one source of income, getting a monthly paycheck and expecting it to cater for all your needs. We have very many needs. We have families, we have dependents, we have relatives, and we also want to enjoy life. We don't want to live from month to month trying to make ends meet. We were made for more. So to be able to save, to invest, to grow, we really need that side hustle, multiple streams of income. So I'm really excited to get this conversation underway. And without further ado, I will give the opportunity to Nancy Mwabili. Just tell us a little bit more about what you do. I've given the introduction, but let's tell us a little bit more about what you do and take us through the initial stages of what a side hustle is and how we can ease into it seamlessly. Nancy, over to you.
Thank you very much. Confirm that you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
All right, Asante Sana. Thanks so much, everyone, and you're so welcome to this session that we have tonight. And thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. My name has been mentioned. I'm Nancy, and I'm a HR strategist. So what I do is that I'm in employment. So even as we talk about side hustles, for me, my job does not quite permit me to be on a side hustle because it's quite involving. And we'll get into some of those conversations because would I want to get into a side hustle? I would. Let me not say I'm not in a side hustle. Maybe what I'm doing is more passive as opposed to a side hustle that would make me actively involved in a business. Because even if you decide to do some passive businesses, whether it is the money markets, whether it is trading in bonds, whether it is share trading, that is still a side hustle, and which is not in conflict and which is not presenting for me challenges. And we'll be able to examine that. Just to unpack some of those observations that we've spoken about, AI refers to emotional intelligence. So I'm an emotional intelligence certified practitioner. So again, that I could say, if I'm having a conversation beyond 5 and I need to train a group of people, that could be a side hustle. I'm also a certified coach. If I get a phone call from you and we agree we are meeting on a Saturday, Saturday is not a working day for me. A public holiday is not a working day for me. So again, I could say those are some of the skills we are saying. Can we monetize and have some side hustles? So yes, I'm a certified coach, and I'm also an author, as you have said. I've authored a book, which is a very personal story of a personal experience I've had of waiting for children. I'm a mother of 4 at that age, between 13 and 4 years old, and I'm a wife. So in total package, that is who I am. And thank you for this opportunity. Karibu sana. Karibuni sana.
Thank you so much for that and for unpacking those titles and what you've said, that indeed there are so many ways you can classify a side hustle. It's not necessarily actively being having another job on the side. If you're in the money markets, if you have bonds, passive income, the idea is to have multiple sources of income, and that can come in multiple ways. So thank you for that, Nancy. I'll also give Martin Wafula a chance to just reintroduce yourself and tell us a little bit more, and then we can go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to have all of you here. Just like Claire, I was actually looking forward to this webinar because I believe this is one of those topics that we are all going to learn from each other, mainly through life experiences, through what you're currently doing, and just trying to redefine, what side hustles are. So I'm happy to meet all of you. My name is Martin Wafula. Currently, I'm the managing director of Law Africa Publishing. It's a subsidiary of Longhorn. So for those in the legal space, they have definitely heard about Law Africa. For the rest of us, we definitely have heard about Longhorn because one way or the other, we used their books when we were growing up. I lead a team of between 15 to 20. And so the reason why I came to this panel is just to share from a supervisor's perspective, what are the do's, what are the don'ts, and how do you manage the different scenarios in terms of, in case any of your staff members is involved in side hustles. And I mean, we all know that post-COVID, it became necessary for people to just have a secondary source of, income. And for that reason, then it is good to just have that conversation vibrant at our workspaces. So again, happy to meet all of you, and I'm looking forward to learn as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Martin. Now to what we have all been waiting for, just getting down to those side hustles. And I'll hand over back to you, Nancy. Could you start by just telling us what a side hustle is, breaking it down, what is and what is not? Because sometimes, as I mentioned, people have an idea that they may be in a side hustle, but it may not be a side hustle after all. Do you have to be making money, a certain amount of money for it to qualify as a side hustle? Take us through what a side hustle is, and then we can pick it from there.
Thank you for that. I would want to share a presentation. I hope that you can see a screen, or it's still coming up.
Yes, it's still loading.
All right.
There we go.
Okay, so we've done the introduction. I want to go to presentation mode, but in case it doesn't move when I'm in presentation mode, just give me heads up so that I can be able to shift. So this is a presentation for today. As you have said, we are taking it between the two of us, between myself and Martin. And what we are going to cover today, we're going to do an introduction to side hustles. We are going to understand the potential challenges of engaging in side hustles. We are going to examine some communication strategies and how to create a supportive culture, legal considerations. We are also going to have some case studies and some wrap up. I think our moderator has had mentioned a bit about that. And we do have some session objectives for today. But before I get into those objectives in terms of what we expect to cover, it would be nice to hear from the participants what they came expecting to receive from this session. So if you could type some responses in the chat, and Hosea could help us read out some of those responses. We want to take our objectives for this session. What is it that you want to carry away at the end of this session? You could type in the chat, or because we are not too many, you could also raise up your hand and just give a prompt response to that.
I think I can start as the other participants start typing and raising their hands. For me, as I said, I was pretty excited about this webinar because I just want to understand that I want to make more money. And I want to have that side hustle, but I want to make sure that I'm not interfering with my main work. So I want to be in a position where I'm able to speak about my side hustle within the office and not say it in undertones because I'm scared that I shouldn't be having another side hustle. I should only be having my job. So I want to make sure that I'm able to talk about my side hustle because I'm doing it in a legal way. So I don't want there to be any conflict of interest. So I'd also like to know that if I have a side hustle that is aligned with what I do, for example, I'm in the media industry and we are creatives. We have multiple skills. So I can have photography skills, I can have moderation skills, I can have emceeing skills. Is it okay for me to, let's say, have a side hustle that's in photography because I'm in the media industry and it encompasses all that? So I just want to understand what is okay and what is not okay, because there's a really thin line.
All right, thank you for that. Do you have any other quick response as we carry on? Thank you for sharing. I'm sure in some of these topics we'll be able to unpack that, and anyone else who may have that kind of objective. Anyone else would want to share another quick objective?
Don't be shy. This is your forum. This is your time. I know you're all here because we're hungry to know about side hustle. So please do raise your hand or just put it within the comment box and then we'll sample them as we go along.
All right, I think they'll take them out and we'll see them as we go, and Hosea will be able to read them for us. But for now, just to carry on in the presentation and confirm to me that my presentation is moving. Is it moving?
Yes, it is. And maybe we can just sample. I can see a comment that's already come in there. Maybe we can sample that and then you can go ahead.
All right, that's perfect. You can take it for me.
Yes, Helen Kahara says, I want to be able to encourage staff in my organization not to shy away and let others know about their side hustles. Thank you for that, Helen.
Wow, yeah, so she wants to know how to be able to have those conversations within a safe space and just normalize people talking about side hustles. So the other objectives that we have for today is that by the end of this session, we want to be able to determine whether or not to engage in a side hustle. And we are going to examine why. We want to be able to avoid pitfalls in our side hustles and be able to generate conversations, as we are saying, regarding side hustles without using undertones. I think I have heard such a term. And we want to be able to determine, we should be able to determine legal steps that we need to take so that we can be able to cushion our side hustle. And I know Martin is going to speak into that. So we said this is a conversation, it is interactive. And at any one point, you can raise up your hand. At any one point, feel free to put your thoughts in the chat, even as we have this interactive session. So I don't know what you see in this picture as we talk about a side hustle, because that might be the question in somebody's mind. What exactly is a side hustle and what passes to be a side hustle? And I could pause again and get a response from any of the participants, either by raising your hand or by typing out in the chat. I know we use hustle very often. We are even saying we are a hustler nation. But what exactly does it mean when we say we are engaging in side hustles?
As that comes through, let me just sample two other comments that have come through from one Catherine Yambura, who says, I want to understand the do's and don'ts when it comes to side hustles when employed, so I can start enlightening my employees on how to increase their income. That's really powerful. That's wonderful. Just empowering employees. That's really good. And then Janvia Ishimwe says, understanding what a side hustle is and how it's done and must be done in a way that does not conflict with my full-time job. That legal aspect is coming out over and over again. Then Helen Kahara says that side hustle is doing something extra other than your job that gives you your income.
Wow, good participation there. And I just want to build on that and say yes, a side hustle could be defined as a part-time job or occupation, which is in addition to the full-time job. Just as she says, it would be an engagement that is income generating, that is over and above what you're paid to do between 8 and 5. You could be in business, and apart from your main business, you could run some other businesses on the side. So those other businesses, in addition to your main business, could also be side hustles. And you could also, it could also be defined as the jobs that you do beyond, as we said, the 8 to 5. And when we think about the side hustle, I know we have come to a point where we are a gig economy. I mean, people are taking more than one job. You talk about your main gig, the side gig, and we want to just look at some statistics. And I hope that my slide is moving. And we may notice that side hustle or having these extra gigs, it is not a new phenomenon. It is a phenomenon that has been there. And when I think about this, I think about my own parents. My parents are retired teachers, but as long as I can remember when we were growing up, my mom would have maybe a farm somewhere where once in a while, because it had many trees, would cut down some trees, sell some firewood, do some farming, so sell some vegetables to the teachers she was working with. Once in a while, go to her shamba, get whether it is bananas or whatever else, or milk, and sell to people. So it is not a new phenomenon. So that was a way of her supplementing her income as a teacher. So side hustles have been there in the past, but we know that they have become much more prominent post-COVID because the statistics that are there actually reveal that in Kenya, they rose by 42% because of what we saw happening during COVID. There were pay cuts, there were unpaid leaves, there were redundancies, and all that were a kind of a wake up call where people noticed, oh, I can't just be able to depend on one job. And it is now more than ever before that even when you say you have a permanent job, permanent and pensionable, the dynamics are such that that permanent and pensionable, most of the time, is written in pencil, meaning it can be rubbed anytime. Permanent is not permanent as it used to be. And that is one of the recent trends then that is there in terms of then contributing to the great rise in side hustles. And in Kenya, part of what we also see is that most of the people who are engaging in the side hustles are in their 30s. And that is not strange. I'm a HR professional. I've worked in different industries. And in every other organization that I've gone to, I have found that the average age, most of the time, is maybe about 35 years. I find most of the time that over 75% or over 80% of the staff within an organization are aged under 40 or under 45 years.
So quick one,
And
Nancy.
Yes.
Your slides haven't moved. You're still on objectives.
Oh, they're not moving. So then I
Yeah.
should stop. Uh,
Yeah. Now you're on the 30 years in Kenya. Yes. Now you're
okay.
on the current slide.
Thank you. I was
Thank
on
you.
the slideshow. I think I'll just exit from that and just move them as they are. And as we talk about it being a global phenomenon, I just came across the statistics from the US market, where a survey carried out revealed that 37% of the surveyed population are engaged in side hustles. And incidentally, they are profitable at an average of USD 686. You can do your mathematics and see how much that translates to per month. So a handsome amount. And also for these 42% that have increased within the Kenyan market, most of them from a survey that I came across have reported that their side hustles are profitable. And maybe I could pause there and find out from the participants, maybe just by giving a tick, how many of us, if you're free to say, are engaged in one kind of side hustle or another? It could be passive income. It could be some farm somewhere where you are carrying out some agricultural business. You do it in your free time. And because I can't see the ticks, I request that Hosea, maybe you could, or the moderator, you could say whether there are any ticks that are coming up.
Yes, I can see people raising their hands. Nelson Oguda has raised his hand. I believe that means he is involved in a side hustle.
Mhm.
Yes. So
Yes.
far, Elizabeth Okumu as well has raised her hand in a side hustle as well.
Yes, it is not a strange phenomenon. And I was also just wanting to look beyond the Kenyan market and beyond the US market. I also got these statistics from a research that was carried out in South Africa. That was even before COVID, just before COVID in 2019. So these statistics could have shifted, and this could speak to why a number of people, even within our context, would engage in side hustles. And from those statistics, we see quite a high percentage of potential workforce being unemployed. At that time, it was 27.6%. And I'm sure by now, post COVID, the situation would even be worse. Some of the other facts that were there was the contracting of the GDP. What happens when GDP contracts? Costs rise, whether it is a cost of living, pay levels, they stagnate. And most of the respondents in this survey, out of a sample size of about 1,158, 30% of them said that they have a side hustle. And a number of them, of those that responded, they said they have been able to disclose the side hustle to the employer. And incidentally, they had been on the same job for more than 10 years for those who have disclosed to their employer. And maybe we could pause there and ask ourselves, why would it be so? If you're new in a job, would you feel safe to, to say that you are engaged in a side hustle? Or do you need to build a bit more trust with your new employer? What would we say, and what is the situation for most of us?
Hello, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening.
Nelson here. What I would say, mine, I always make it straightforward during the interview so that it doesn't bring conflict as you move on. Yes.
Mhm. Wow, I think that's a good one. He says it during the interview, so that after that they won't find him to have been dishonest, or it is not viewed that he has a conflict of interest. Is there someone who is of a different opinion, who waits first to build trust and then speak about it with confidence?
And maybe Nelson could also share with us what the main hustle is and the side hustle is, just so that people can see in their mind whether they could also be in that position to say it during the interview.
Okay. Mine, I do trainings. Actually, I do so many things. I do trainings, mostly in the HR space. So should I go for interview? I would always want to say again that I do this and this, so once in a while I might be called somewhere to go and train. So that day I will need to take my off day and all that. So if you're comfortable with me coming in with all those troubles and problems, then it will be good for me or for both of us. So I think, and again, when you have a side hustle that you do, and it's aligned to your career, that is now, like you see now, mine could be easy because it also again helps me get some of the interviews, because now people are even calling you to go to try and work with you. So again, if the side hustle is what goes hand in hand with your main job, then you'll want to make it known. But I don't tell you that I'm also a plumber on the side, because that one now is so much different from my work. Yeah.
Interesting, an interesting conversation there, and we are going to have more of it this evening. Thanks so much for your participation. Coming back home, in terms of how the Kenyan market has shifted, we notice these are just statistics of the growth in terms of population out of the different censuses that have been carried out. Right now, we are beyond the 50 mark, because by 2019, we were 47.6%. And then, of course, we know that the life expectancy has shifted. It has increased a bit. And when we talk about 50 and above, in terms of 50 plus M, in terms of the total population, we know that most of these are within the productive age. They are the young people, they're the people who are within the employment space. And that is within a context of it is within a context of shrinking some of the dynamics that are there. It is within the context of right now, definitely the cost of living has gone down, has gone up significantly. We have the issue of joblessness that has shifted. And these statistics that I came across, they're talking about jobless persons shifting not from 2.94%, but it's an actual number of 2.94M in just a few months to September, between August and September 2023. And that could have shifted even further within the current year, because within the current year, we notice an inflation rate that has shifted significantly. As in March, we were at 9.2%. There's a situation of underemployment. People are disconnected to their personal aspirations, because these days you study to be a marketer, for example, and you find yourself doing a different job, because with the current rate of unemployment as we are seeing it, and with the current rate of underemployment, we are fond of saying kazi ni kazi. So whatever kind of job you see or you find first, once you graduate, you take that job. And I just want to give you a moment to consider this photograph that is here and give your thoughts of what you think it is. It was in the Nation newspaper on Tuesday, 4th of April. That was about 3 weeks ago. I don't know how many of us could relate to this, to having seen that kind of scenario. What do you think this is? And what do you think these people are doing?
Yeah, it looks to me that people are lining up to go for an interview or to drop their CVs. I can see some with envelopes, and it just speaks to the situation that we're in. And just to even give an example, at my workplace, I remember one of the recent cohorts of interns that have come, and he was saying that one time he had gone for an internship interview, and he was on the line and they were waiting. They got there at about 8 a.m. And then by the time the line had gone, it was about 3 p.m. So during that time, he was interacting with the people on the line, and he was talking to this guy. And he was so shocked that this guy had a master's degree and was there lining up for an internship. And he was like, the situation is really bad. So he was like, whoa, I'm just trying to finish my degree, but there are people here who have their master's degree and they're lining up for that same internship. So it speaks to what you're talking about, underemployment. People are like, kazi ni kazi. Maybe if I just start with that internship, I'll get my foot in the door and then I'll get a job. So it can be really tough.
Exactly. And you've said it right. These are people that are queuing for an interview. Can you imagine? They are in ties. Most probably, most of these are university graduates. There's a time I showed up for an interview. I won't say where and I won't say which year. But we had been asked to report at 8. We had received emails maybe a few days before. And when we showed up for those interviews, they were psychometrics, but we were so many. We were being taken through the psychometrics in turns. One round of people take an interview, about 100 of you. You finish your interview in an hour, you sign off, and another team comes up and just speaks to the pathetic situation that is there, as we are saying. And that is why we can't avoid having this kind of conversations of side hustles. We have seen it in social media. We have seen it when you're driving on the highways. Graduates holding up banners. I'm a graduate of this degree. I hold a master's degree. Give me a job. That is the kind of situation we are speaking into. So these are some of the reasons that are causing side hustles, and we can examine a number of them. I know we could go into discussions and talk about them. But right now, we have a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty with the kind of background that you have given, looking at underemployment and unemployment. There's a lot of uncertainty. We are coming from what has been described for many years as a VUCA environment, where the environment is volatile, it is unpredictable, things are shifting so fast. And of
Nancy, if you'll
course,
just allow me to ask Nelson to mute the mic so that we can hear properly. Thank you.
thank you,
Okay.
Nelson. Thank you for that. I think I hadn't noticed where that sound was coming from. And these are some of the reasons why a number of us would want to engage in side hustles because of the uncertainty, as you have said, of formal employment. We saw people getting into pay cuts, and some organizations are yet to get out of it post-COVID. Can you imagine 3 years after? Pay cuts, job insecurity. So there's financial distress and financial stress. You want to supplement your income, you want extra cash. We saw the age group within the Kenyan context of the age of 30, thereabout 30 to 40, who form the highest band of the people who are engaged in side hustles. These are people who most probably are bringing up young children. They have obligations, and they also want to invest maybe some extra cash to be able to pay for education as children go on with their education. Some of us, depending uh, on the age band you're in, would want to start a side hustle as a structure for retirement because you don't want to retire to nothing. Some people would want to get into side hustles to utilize or monetize specific skill sets that they have, or just the desire to take charge because sometimes you're kind of, do you want to be under the mercy of an employer forever? So sometimes some of us want to take charge of their own course as far as their career is concerned. And that desire to take charge could drive someone to starting a side hustle. And then, of course, there's a desire for a number of people who might want to get into side hustles to express a passion or to fulfill a passion. Because we said these days, kazi ni kazi. But hata kama kazi ni kazi, maybe there's a passion that you have and you can express that since you're not able to get it from your main gig. You can be able to express that by starting a side hustle. And there's this saying by Mark Twain that speaks into passion that says that find a job that you enjoy doing and you never have to work a day in your life. But even as we talk about the potential and the excitement of getting into side hustles, it's important for us to understand some potential pitfalls. And I'm talking this from HR perspective. Sometimes there are time constraints, and you have to be able to examine that. Your main gig, your 8 to 5, can it possibly accommodate a side hustle? So how much of your time are you able to engage into that? Because if then there's competition for time between your side hustle and your main gig, you don't want to get into that because you don't want to jeopardize your job. Sometimes you could start putting aside some cash for your side hustle and you start investing too much into it that it actually digs for you a hole and causes financial stress. And that is why it is advisable, and maybe Martin will speak into that when you're starting a side hustle, it is better to start small and have some generic growth as far as starting off a side hustle is concerned, so that you don't find yourself getting into financial distress or financial stress. There are legal issues that is going to speak into. And most of the common ones is the issue of conflict of interest. And I think Nelson, as he gave his own example, he spoke a bit into that. There are other side legal issues apart from conflict of interest, operating and registered businesses, contracting issues. You could get, if you are in a side hustle, and we'll get into that, an employer would be concerned because of some reputational issues, that if a staff within an organization is involved in a side hustle and they get into some issues out there regarding the way they're operating their businesses, what does it mean for the business, for example? But we are going to examine that when you're talking about some of the risks that employers need to consider as they think about whether to encourage a culture of side hustles or not. But for the person engaging in a side hustle, there is also the pitfall or the potential challenge of having a poor strategy or not having a strategy at all. For the organizations we work for, the vision, mission, objectives are very well spelled out. But what about our side hustles? Are we in side hustles just for the sake of it? Is it just for making an extra coin? Or have we put structures around that? There's the potential and the pitfall of distracting performance, because if you are doing this retail business and you're doing it from your boot, and the way to do it is you are, for example, advertising through social media, and you've given a phone number, and for half of the time when you're in a meeting, you are responding to WhatsApp messages. What does it mean as far as your performance is concerned? So distracting your performance in your main gig then becomes a potential challenge or pitfall when you think about engaging in side hustles. And from the employer perspective, these are some of the risks that we need to look out for. Because I heard some of us say, I think there's someone who shared and said that they want to know how to be able to support their teams, to be able to speak without whispers on the corridor about their side hustles. And one of them is a conflict of the side gig with the main job in terms of time, in terms of some of the intellectual property that is created during a side hustle. It would be interesting to hear how Nelson does it as he's coming up with these training modules. How does he make sure that it is not conflicting with what he's doing, and he's not charging his employer for doing the same kind of job within the organization? I remember there's a time we were talking about abbreviations, and one of the abbreviation that was there within my title was PDA analyst, meaning that I'm certified in doing some behavioral assessments that would inform recruitment, that would inform personal development of staff within an organization. And I was working in this organization, and we were doing some PDA assessments. And I remember a senior member within the organization asking me and wondering why I am not quoting for using my skill to interpret that. And I wouldn't do it because for me it would be a conflict of interest. And those are some of the risks that we need to think about as employers. These employees that we are giving leeway to engage in side hustles, is it well spelled out? If they come up with products, for example, if they come out with ideas, if there's intellectual property that they come up with that is created during a side hustle, how does that translate into the main job? Right now, we have moved again into remote working offsite, which makes it easier to engage into side hustles. But then from an employer perspective, how do we monitor compliance with working time regulations? That is something that we need to think about and look out for. What about someone who is on a sick leave for a week? And then during that week, maybe Nelson is on leave, on sick leave, and it's genuine, it's from a doctor. But a side gig comes up, someone calls him for a training, and he goes for a training. Is that acceptable? Is it legal because this leave is paid? Is it a risk for the employer, so to say? If someone is on leave, and maybe Martin again will speak into that, because for me, that is what I would also think about as an employer coming from the HR department and a custodian. If people go on annual leave and it's paid, should they be permitted to engage in side hustles? And these are some of the risks that we have to be true to, think about them, talk about them in the open, so that then we see how best to create a supportive culture. Of course, for some organizations, they are very definite, they're very clear about that. No side hustle, whether it is in conflict or not. Some of the kind of contracts that people sign, and maybe you've signed that kind of contract. And that is why once you get into an organization, you have to get to understand what kind of organization it is. Is it the kind of organization that does not permit you to do anything else apart from your job? Or does it just talk about any extra job that is in direct competition? Those are risks, again, from an employer perspective that we have to think about. And then, of course, the other risk of using company time, using company property. You are having a training. You are there in the office. Yes, the training is after 5, but you're busy in the office printing handouts. That is a risk that an employer has to think about when, even as they start having conversations about side hustles within a workspace. I think we already spoke into performance issues because of the potential conflict in terms of your time, in terms of performance. And that is why this gentleman, I think it's a gentleman who said that if an employee is paying attention to their side hustle more than the job they're paid for, then definitely there's an issue. And whereas there are risks, there are two sides of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that having a culture that supports or promotes side hustles would stimulate creativity and innovation within the work environment. It enhances engagement. It can assist in building trust, because if I'm able to walk to my boss and market to them a tie without hiding, then it has opened up ways of conversation. It is a good ventilator also in terms of decreasing burnout. And it's also motivating for staff. We have already said that most of the staff who are there within the work environment right now, it's Generation Y, Generation Z are already in the work market. There are people who don't want to have someone control them or look over their shoulder to see what they're doing past their hours. Should it be my business as an employer to find out what someone is doing after 5? So it increases motivation. There's competency development because once you're engaging in your side gig, and for me, I remember that was one of the greatest points of growth I had a few years ago. When I started, it wasn't quite a side business, but I got involved into an entrepreneurial activity. At that time, I was not having a job. And I found that the kind of growth in terms of leadership, in terms of proactivity, in terms of problem solving, and this, when you come to an interviewer, is it this what we ask for in a CV in terms of competencies? So engaging in side hustles is a good way within an organization and that promotes side hustles of competency development within their workers. Issues of transferable skills or new skills, business acumen, entrepreneurship. Again, I worked in an organization a few years ago. And one of the reasons that I was hired in this job, it's because my prospective employer saw that I had attempted a business. Never mind that the business failed. It was a printing business. But the fact that I had taken some risk, the fact that I seemed to have some business acumen, it got me a job as one of the key points. And of course, ultimately, encouraging side hustles. would also contribute to staff retention, because this Texas-based article aside, that talks about 71% of employees with side gig not wanting to turn it into their day job. Within the Kenyan context, again, I noticed that a number of people or employees who are engaged in side hustles, they don't want in the short term to turn them into side gigs. And if someone is getting some extra income and they're being supported to do that, definitely they want to stay with that employer. So having seen both sides of the coin in terms of the potential risks, and in terms of the benefits, what then can we be able to do as employers to be able to support? Definitely one of the things that we need to do is to create a supportive policy, and also have very clear communication guidelines as to whether we permit side hustles or not, as to whether as to what constitutes conflict of interest and what does not constitute conflict of interest. And I want to pause there and open it up for one or two comments as we shift on to talk about communication of side hustles with Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Nancy. That's a wonderful presentation. And a number of things have stuck out for me from your presentation. And the first thing is that you said, while before we were talking about being a permanent and pensionable employee, that is now written in pencil. So there's no such thing as permanent and pensionable. You can be erased, meaning you can lose your job. So it's really important to have that side hustle. But how you go about it is really what counts. And I like the way you ended that presentation by talking about how do you approach going about this side hustle in terms of your outlook. So in terms of being creative, if the employer looks at it, no, they're not just having a side hustle and they're doing their thing out there, it's going to make them more creative. And it made me think about this whole issue of nursing stations as well, because I'm very passionate about nursing stations, and there's still some organizations that do not have nursing stations. And this has led to very many women dropping out of the workforce because it just becomes so difficult to ensure you get to that 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding while at the same time working. So one of the things that the government said is that if you have those nursing stations, you're going to have a lady who is able to express, and expressing means that this milk is the healthiest for a baby for those 6 months. And that means that that woman she has peace of mind. And if you have peace of mind, then you are productive at work. So it boils down to how you look at things. So in terms of a side hustle, if you have a supportive employer, they will look at it in terms of, as long as there's no conflict of interest, you can have your side hustle and it will make you more motivated. It will make you more creative in the workspace. And then you'll also not have to keep on asking for salary increments. So it's really about your outlook for it. So those are the things that have stood out for me, and really making sure that there is no conflict of interest. And I also want to give that example of being in the media space. I remember one time there was someone who was talking about you have resources that are given to you. You talked about the printing paper, that you're busy using the company's printer and printing paper to do training manuals for your trainees. So make sure there's no conflict of interest. Don't be eating into your employer's time and their resources. I remember this person was using their computer, so they are a part-time DJ. So now the whole question became that, okay, you're a part-time DJ, but that laptop that you're using to spin your tunes is what the employer gave you. So there are so many slippery slopes that you have to think about when it comes to that side hustle. So thanks for that presentation. And I'd like to hear from the rest of the attendees, your experiences in this whole side hustle thing, and all about what Nancy has pointed out. I'm seeing there Nelson saying, remember not to use your employer's resources or assets. Thanks for that. Yeah. So make sure sometimes you don't even think about it. That person might have thought about the laptop after the fact. So there you are on social media saying, I'm at this gig, I will be the DJ for this night. And then someone else from the organization, your boss sees, but wait a minute, you're using the laptop we gave you. So it's slippery. I'd like to hear from the rest of you all some of the experiences and maybe even pitfalls you've had. I can see Peter Ndungwa is saying it's encouraging to see how finally these conversations are getting normalized. Very important indeed. Yes. Thank you for that. Keep those comments coming, and you can raise your hands and unmute your mic and tell us live some of your experiences and some of the challenges you've faced when navigating this side hustle arena. I'd like to hear two more from our attendees, and then we can move on. Feel free to unmute your mic or share a message on the text box. I can see again, thank you for that, Peter Ndungwa. The truth is people are more bigger in potential than that one single role that one is hired for. Indeed, people have a multiplicity of skills. And so just how do you go about using them? As Nancy put it properly, there are many reasons people go for side hustles. There's the money, which is a very big element. But then there are some people who have these skills and they have a passion. So you have these skills and you're like, why don't I use my skill and make money out of it? They say if you don't use it, you lose it. So that's one of the reasons to go into a side hustle, to use that skill. And also some people are trying to transition to something else. So you say, let me start it as a side hustle and see if I can transition slowly by slowly. Remember, Nancy said that it's good to go small. Don't go so big and then it fails and then you're left in a quagmire. So thanks for that. I think we'll sample other questions. I can see Bernard Kinyanjui has raised his hand. You can unmute your mic and give us your comment.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I wanted to make a contribution with regard to side hustles. And one of the most common that I have experienced as a HR is where a person is employed in the full-time job, but in the course of mingling with the clients of the main hustle or the main employment, you realize that the same clients have got another need that you can fill. And you begin exploiting these clients. And giving a specific example, someone was employed as a loan officer. And in the course of doing transactions with the clients, they realized that the clients needed passport photos for every application that they needed. So using the phone that has been financed by the organization, they are taking photos of the clients. Then they are charging them a fee, not too high, maybe 100 or 150. They go to a cyber, produce at 20 bob, and then they go and affix it to the same loan application forms of the clients of the organization within the main clients. So this comes and becomes a serious contradiction of the interest, because you are charging clients an extra fee, which is not too much, in order for you to get some extra earning or some extra income. And in most cases, this breaches the value of integrity, and someone ends up losing a job because of 150 shillings or 200 shillings that you probably could have just kept without. So in this case, I urge that even when we are doing the side hustles, it's good that we take a boundary. We know where we can cross the line and breach other integrity issues that possibly can cause us a loss of the main job that we are employed in. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that example, Bernard. It's really good. And I think in the next session, we'll just be made to understand what is conflict of interest, because maybe to that person they were thinking, you know what, I've not gone and started my own loan firm and taking your clients. All I'm doing is adding a complementary service, but really there is a conflict of interest. So really understanding those things that someone might be saying, I'm just smart. I saw there was a need for photos and I decided to make a side hustle out of that. You're still getting your loan clients. So really understanding, it's a very slippery slope. So just understanding what is conflict of interest. Thank you so much for that example, Bernard Kinyanjui. And I can also see Catherine Yambura has commented here, a big hindrance to the adoption of this conversation at the workplace will be convincing management that employees would spend company time advancing their side hustle at the expense of the company. Indeed, that is a very, very pertinent thing. And just to add on to that, the way Nancy had mentioned, if you're on sick leave, if we see you now posting on social media how you went to to MC a gig somewhere else, and we're like, we thought you were on sick leave, is that acceptable? And then that is maybe that one we may say, okay, that's unacceptable. But for someone who is on their annual leave, you are entitled to your 21 days or your 30 days or whatever your company policy says. And in my 30 days, I decide, you know what? I'm going to be doing some training somewhere else. Is that okay? So we really need to understand the dynamics on that. And also somebody else who is gone on maternity leave. It is a legal requirement. You're supposed to get your 90 days. And within that time, you probably think to yourself, you know what? It's a lot of work dealing with a newborn, raising a newborn, but I can do some things from home, okay? I can knit when I have a few minutes here and there, which is not a lot, but you can knit and then sell these things. So where is the boundary? We really need to understand that. I want to sample some other comments that are coming in over here. Nelson Oguda says, always let your boss, your manager, know how your side hustle is. We work for them, and if they don't buy in, you will lose your main job. I think that's a very powerful point. So just that courage, because just as Nelson had told us that you always make it known to a potential employer that, hey, I do training. So if I am called upon during the week or during some time in the month or the quarter, I may need to go for that. So how many of us have that courage to during the interview? We're just trying to get that job. And as Nancy said, there's a lot of underemployment. Now, if you're just going for that job, how many people have that courage to say, you know what, I also have this side hustle? Maybe it may not be training, it may be selling samosas because you're just trying to make ends meet. And then there are so many people who are lining up for that job. How many of you are going to say, I have a side hustle? And you know, how is it going to be taken? Will I get that job, or will it be looked at as I will not be very loyal? So how do we just go about it in a wise way? So thanks for that. Peter Ndungwa says side hustle have turned into the main hustle. A very critical point there. However, for this to happen within a win-win situation, frameworks have to be put in place and all have to adhere to them. Otherwise, it shall be a sad state if an employee will act in bad faith. Thank you for that. And he also echoes what Catherine Nyambura says, that trust plays a big role in successful side hustles. So I think those are very powerful points. Continue putting them on the comment section and we will continue to sample them as we go along. But I think what is coming out clearly is let us understand the lines. So I think it's time to go to the next part of that presentation to understand what is the line between what is legal and what is not legal. And I think, Martin, now you can take us through this. Where are we going to be doing the right thing, and when are we really playing with fire and risking losing our jobs?
Thank you, Claire. Quite happy with how you're moderating this so far. Good job. Please confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So what I'll do, I'll cover the communication strategies in terms of how then do you break this news to your boss, because at some point it's bound to happen. Then I'll also look at what are the legal implications, the do's and the don'ts. Then finally, I'll just do a couple of case studies to drive the point home. So I would need you to confirm if we have moved to the next slide.
Yes, we have.
Okay. So in terms of communication strategy, the first thing you need to actually ask yourself is, I know we say what you don't know doesn't hurt you, but critically what you need to know is that there are certain things that someone might not know, but they'll come across them. So you need to ask yourself, is your side hustle important enough to disclose? Because again, the whole process of communicating to your boss, as we all know, when you're going to your supervisor, it's usually a weighty issue. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is whether your side hustle is important enough to disclose to your boss. I'll give a couple of examples just to drive this home. So maybe you have a farm up country and you sell groundnuts. Um, do we need to know that? And I say this from an angle whereby your supervisor probably has many things he's dealing with. I take an example of myself. So on a day-to-day basis, I have an expectation from the board of directors to just give them the health check of the business. I have shareholders who I'm dealing with. I have suppliers. I have customers. So you also need to ask yourself, is this very important that it needs to be disclosed? And how do you determine that? We look at point number 2, the size of your hustle versus the size of the business. So if today you're employed at, let's say, Farmer's Choice, because they produce chicken products. So let me say if you're an employee at Farmer's Choice and you have your 5 chicken in your backyard that are giving you maybe 50 eggs a week, is that something that you need to disclose to your boss that you have a side hustle? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. What's the turnover of the business versus what you need to disclose? Is it non-compete or is it competing? Again, I'll use a practical example here. Back in the days, I used to work at Cooperative Bank, and one of the clauses in our contracts was you were prohibited from engaging in competing activities. I know a couple of people who actually lost their jobs because it got to the HR office that they were lending money. Of course, the core business of a bank is to lend money. So for some people, maybe because they had you have a bit of extra cash and you think you'll do short-term lending, we call it shylocking. A few people got in trouble, they lost their job. So again, ask yourself, is it a non-compete or is it competing with your main job? That will determine, again, how you go about in terms of communication. The other one that you need to consider, the time intensity. And I gave a good example here. We all know a couple of our friends who, for one reason or the other, probably before or even during COVID, they got into the Uber business. So as we all know, if you're doing Uber business, then your app needs to be on most of the times. If you consider that vis-a-vis a tech guy who is trading in crypto or forex trading, one of them is time intensive because you can imagine you are at your desk and your app is on, then a customer request comes in for Uber. That means you have to find a reason maybe to leave your desk and go fulfill that. So if you compare that vis-a-vis someone who is doing a passive one, then you also need to have that wisdom to know how do you go about communicating that. The last one that I needed to talk about is the work hours. Does your hustle run after hours or will it affect your 8 to 5? A good example here is a couple of our friends who maybe during the day they have the 8 to 5. Then in the evening he has an evening class for maybe HR or accounting or whatever it is in one of the colleges in town. So again, does it affect your 8 to 5 or is it after hours? These are some of the things you need to look at. So before you communicate, we're usually told you need to have what we call a basic KYC on your boss. Again, know your customer. Your boss is one of your customers because they have a direct impact in terms of your output and in terms of just your career path because they appraise you again. So one of the things that you need to know about your boss is his personality and temperament. Is he someone who is uptight? Is it someone who is liberal and approachable? these are things we don't talk about, but a good number of our bosses have self-esteem issues. So you need to be very alive to the personality of your boss. The second thing you need to also be very keen on is his views on entrepreneurship. Now, this one, it's very easy to pick out. If you're a salesperson and maybe you're struggling to close a sale and you come to your boss for some guidance, and you're able to tell whether are they able to come up with a customizable solution for the customer you're trying to close or not, or are they just for them, they're like, oh, if the customer does not want, why can't we pitch to someone else? So it would be very easy for you to pick out his views on entrepreneurship based on such a scenario. Secondly, also, just his views about the current market, how things are turning out. You can easily pick that out. So that will be able to build into how and what communication strategy then you're going to use to communicate this to your supervisor. The other factors to also just be alive to is you should always refer to the company manual as well as the employment contract in terms of what they say about other engagements away from your employment. Then also, like I said, you need to know whether it's active or passive. Those are very important points. So at this point, assuming that you're very sure that you must communicate to your supervisor, then how do you do that? Like I said, if it's a collaborative and non-compete hassle, you can choose to be upfront and direct. Good example, we've just come across, is it Nelson, the HR participant? A situation like that, it could actually be collaborative in terms of transfer of skills, because if you're doing it as a passion, there's a high chance that it will actually impact your daily output in your current job. Nelson will also go out maybe training other institutions or other corporates together with other practitioners. What happens is there'll be knowledge transfer from those forums into himself, and he'll be able to bring that same sort of vibe to his current position. So in situations like those, you just need to be upfront and direct. Wherever you're not sure whether it's whether it's a potential compete, then also based on again the personality of your boss, you might want to use an emissary. In this case, who are his peers? Or in most cases, a very objective HR would actually form a very good intermediary in terms of just communicating the fact that Martin is in sales department, but he's also doing one or two things, and he mentioned it to me as part of the HR, and I've checked in the manual. This is what it says, but I just thought I would mention that to you as the supervisor as well. So it will be important for you to just know that those are the two ways you can approach. What is underlying for both of them? Remember, when you're going to mention these side hustles, please don't approach it like a KPI discussion. KPI is when you've been summoned, you're being asked about your performance. Make this be very easy and casual, and the conversations will be more effective than if you approach it from some sort of a performance or KPI discussion. I would also look at how do you communicate boundaries and also the expectations. So remember, by the time you've made up your mind, you need to communicate about your side hustle to your supervisor. We've been told severally that you need to start small in most cases. But I'm sure at the point where you believe you want to disclose this information, you're confident enough in what you're doing as a side hustle. So the first thing you need to consider is, what is the culture of the company? If you work in an organization where boundaries are not respected, rest assured boundaries will not be respected in your side hustle. But again, it doesn't harm to just, as you communicate that, then you just need to make sure this is what I'm doing on the sides. Obviously, people will try to get more information, but again, the culture of the company will have a direct impact in terms of whether they'll respect your boundaries or not. The second thing that you need to be very sure about is you need to make your boss comfortable that your side hustle will not have a direct impact on your main hustle, as we've been calling them. And a good example is, you tell them, look, for the last 2 quarters, I've been the star performer, but at the same time, this thing has been running on the side. So just give him that assurance that whatever is happening on the sides will not have any impact on your performance. The other thing in terms of boundaries and expectations is, so because you're earning extra coins on the sides, there are people who actually, they start exhibiting changes. Totally normal, totally human. Make sure it does not inconvenience your colleagues or your boss. I was told of an example where someone did a side gig. I don't know how true this is. Paid him some very good money. In a couple of months, they showed up, looking all flashy, and people could easily tell. And when they were being asked, they're like, "Oh, it's that tender that I did." When you're doing that, also just be sure that you are able to face the consequences, because any organization can easily decide to do a lifestyle audit on you. So in that case, it becomes very hard to draw those boundaries. So in as much as you're engaging in the side hustles, please be professional in conduct. Make sure you're still working with colleagues. Rather, remember that you're still working with colleagues in your main hustle. And finally, please remember to keep your word, because this far, your main hustle has sustained you. You're just branching out to get an extra coin. So when you say that you're going to record consistent performance, please make sure you stick to that. It is one of those areas that, from some of us as supervisors, then it becomes a very sticky issue where this person has a side hustle, then all of a sudden their performance is also dropping. In that case, that commitment that I made that I will not intrude in your side hustle, it can be easily breached, because I'll be like, "Hey, Nelson, I noticed that your sales have begun declining. Is it that you're dedicating more time to your side gig, or what's happening?" So to avoid any such intrusion, then just make sure you keep your word, whether it's in terms of not abusing the company resources, or you promised to make sure that you will have solid and steady performance. Continue. I could pause there if there are any reactions before I proceed.
Wow, thanks so much for that, Martin. I think there are some very powerful points that you've put there. And I think just from where you started, is it important before you start saying that you're selling those groundnuts, as you said, or you're selling your samosas? Is it important in the grand scheme of things? So, what are you doing? How much does your salary earn you versus how much does this side hustle give you? Remember that, as you said, your supervisor, your manager, your director has so many things to do. As you said, you have meetings with maybe the board of directors, you have meetings with clients, you have meetings with so many people. So do you need to go and start saying about this groundnut? So really think about it in a broad perspective before you go for that meeting. And as you said, don't make it so formal. make it a little bit casual. And I like what you said about understanding your boss, because KYC, we always think about KYC as that client out there, but your boss is also your customer, because they determine so many areas of your life. I mean, your earnings and whatnot. So before you go there, understand their personality. Before you can go there, understand their views on entrepreneurship. I think I really like that point. So pose a question about entrepreneurship and see what they have to say about it, and it will give you a good indication of whether they are for people who are entrepreneurial or not. And then you will know how to really assess the situation. So it really calls for emotional intelligence, really, and situational awareness, and really going with how your boss is, really. So I think those are some really powerful points to note. And I'd like to hear from the rest of the participants, their experiences and what they've gotten from this. And I'd also like to ask you, Martin, for that example that Bernard gave us of the man who was in a loan firm and he was doing photos. Was that a conflict of interest? Because you've talked about complementary, like what Nelson does, he does training that can be complementary. Now, with that case of the person who is working for a loan firm and then decides to start a side hustle of doing the photos, and that brings in the question of how important is it? Because remember, I said it's maybe 100, 150 shillings. But if there's somebody in that kind of atmosphere, is it a non-compete or is it compete?
Okay, technically, if you're to look at it from the two solutions this guy was providing, the main solution he was providing is to get applicants for the loans, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with the photos, if you ask me. Technically, the person who is coming to apply for a loan should have a photo. So from that perspective, those two are actually not competing in any way. In any case, he was just finding a complementary solution. Okay. Again, unfortunate that he lost his job for such a small amount. But if you ask me, again, it boils down to what I just said. What is the culture within the company? Okay, that is also very critical. But if you ask me, that was not a compete.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'd also think it's a non-compete, but it really boils down. So you need to understand your environment. Really, it boils down to that, because as much as it's non-compete, if you have an organizational culture where they do not appreciate you doing anything else, then it may not be wise to try such stunts. And the reality of the matter is that we have all types of personalities. As much as we would like to say it's good to have people who encourage people to be creative, to go out there and have multiple sources of income, not everybody appreciates that, and not everybody is going to encourage you. So you must be very much aware of your environment, and that comes in very closely with the toxic environment. So if you're in a toxic environment, if you start going to do your business, as much as it's complementary, you might find people who are sabotaging you. So just be very aware of your environment and be smart about it. There's a comment here from Nelson who is saying another thing, I think it's more on the compete and non-compete, writing CVs for applicants to apply for the jobs in the company you work for. So that is a tricky one, right, Martin?
Yeah, that sounds like a humorously interesting one. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Nancy here, Nancy Mwabili, our other speaker, says, even if it's a non-compete, is there a moral issue conducting direct personal business with your employer's customer? Actually, that is a very good point right there, Nancy Mwabili. It may not be actually non-compete, but then there's the moral dilemma there. So yeah, that is something to think about, right, Martin?
Very true, and it takes me back to the point I made about KYC. Know your customer, and in this case, when you're talking of the customer, it's your boss, it's your organization, it's your colleagues, it's the culture around you, because you might mean well by, there's some companies who actually they encourage innovation. Okay, on a light note, this guy was just trying to be innovative enough to make sure that he doesn't lose the loan applicant by making sure that he has an all-inclusive solution, but that innovation definitely got him in trouble. So basic KYC is very important.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks for that. We'd like to hear more experiences from the rest of the attendees. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask your question or make your comment of experiences maybe you've had or you've had other people have had in this situation, because I think those are very important points that have been brought out there by Martin and also Nancy. So kindly continue putting your comments there and just raise your hand and share with us your experiences.
Great. As we wait for that, I guess we can move on to the next one, where
Yes.
I just said, so now you have this side hustle that you've settled on. You have thought through whether to communicate or not to communicate. Then what do we need to know about the legal, what is your legal position, whether it's an employer or an employee? So generally in Kenya, nothing prohibits you from starting a side hustle. There's no law that says you cannot do it. What is out there is, even as you do that, there are certain things, I would call them legal considerations, which you just need to have at the back of your mind to avoid the pitfalls that we are talking about. Someone said, you don't want to lose your main gig that is giving you 100,000 per month because of a side gig that you're starting off and it's maybe giving you 2K per month. So the two that usually stand out mainly is the conflict of interest and also IP, in this case, copyright and any other intellectual property considerations. So I'll just generally run through those ones. I'll start off with a conflict of interest. So in the event that your personal interests or whatever you're doing will affect your output with the employer, in that case, you will be said to be conflicted. So in case of a side hustle, let's say, so a good example was given by Nancy, and I like her practical example. Let's say you've set up a side business, maybe you're selling online clothes, but in your wisdom or the lack of it, you have put your personal cell phone number there. So every time you're in the office, maybe you guys are in a meeting, a customer calls, or nowadays they use WhatsApp for business. So you're busy on WhatsApp, a chat has come in, someone is asking you, I want this one. Then they pay, they forward you the details, um, and maybe at some point they need to call you to confirm whether you've dispatched. If all that, and so you're doing all that, and imagine you're working at a call center, okay, where let's say 90% of your time you're expected to be answering customer calls. So in this case, there'll be customer calls plus now your own customer calls. What is going to happen is that you will be, you'll be in a serious case of conflict of interest because you're likely to start attending to your calls more than the calls that are coming through the call center. So that's a good example that I can just give to seal that one. One of actually the thing that you need to refer to in terms from a legal perspective is the Employment Act of 2007, and it covers quite a number of issues around both IP and conflict of interest. So Section 30 of that Employment Act, it outlines for you as an employee, it outlines what the employer expects from you. And you can just take some time to go through it. But I mean, if someone has offered you a job, they expect you to act in good faith and avoid any conflict that will, affect the output as expected of you. In the same act, Section 32, it then points out grounds on which an employer can actually use to discharge you from your job. And they say one of them
Martin,
includes.
if I can interrupt shortly, are you able to turn on your video so people can see you?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Apologies for that. So I was saying, Section 32 lays out several grounds on which an employer can actually discharge you from your duties. And one of them that stands out, which speaks to this topic, is conflict of interest. So if the employer is able to prove that what you're doing or what you're engaging in is conflicting in terms of your output and expectations, then they can actually discharge you from your job, and they can just refer that to Section 32 of the Employment Act. If you go down to Section 46 again, you can just take some time to look at this. Or I keep saying, please make sure you have a lawyer in your speed dial. We all get in trouble one way or the other. So Section 46, then it's now an expectation from you as an employee. What are you supposed to do in terms of the employment law? And it clearly states that you're expected to disclose any personal interests that are likely to be conflicted with the role that either you're holding or you're taking up. Again, it's very easy for people to refer to the law when they want to execute whatever it is. So what are you supposed to do, whether it's an employer or an employee, in the event of this side hustles discussions? So you just need to make sure as an employee that your side hustle does not affect what is expected of you. Whatever you signed off in your KPI, in your contract, you should not allow the side hustle to affect the output as expected. You are also not expected to misuse the company resources to pursue your side hustle. And employers have gone a step ahead to ensure that they cover themselves on this by putting a clause in the employment contracts, which then, it prohibits you from certain types of side hustles, especially if they are competing. Then it also requires that you disclose if you're in a side hustle. From the point of an employee, expectation is that you are actually expected to disclose any potential conflict. And in some cases, you will actually be expected to get a written permission, especially if the conflict is of significant impact that it needs to be disclosed. A good example that is very common is, especially for the software developers, because in most cases it's very unlikely that you'll work for an employer. So for most of them, they actually have to disclose this. I'll also briefly talk about intellectual property rights. As that word sounds, intellectual property. It just means anything that you have created out of your intellect. So legal rights that have been created out of the human minds. In this case, any innovations, any logos, designs, artistic works, most of that, they're actually protected by the intellectual property law. So again, the Employment Act 2007, so part 1 of the section 30, expressly says that, if you're working for, let's say, company X, I'll take an example of, if you're working for Safaricom, whatever IPs that will be created during that time when you're contracted with Safaricom, it actually belongs to the employer. Now, of course, there are exceptions whereby such, IP items or copyrights might belong to the employee, but in a case like that, there has to be an agreement written. Otherwise, the section 30 part 1 outrightly says that as long as you're employed by that company, then all the innovations that you will come up with during your period of employment, they belong to the organization. So we need to be very cognizant of this, because we've heard of cases whereby someone said, this item was my innovation, but the employer said, no, you are still employed by us. So to avoid all those things, then, and especially for the creatives, so then it gives you room to either just have that negotiated with your employer, or in the event that is not possible, then at the end of the day, whatever you come up with, whether it's innovation, it is assumed by law to be the property of your employer. So it will be critical for me to just mention that. But again, like I've said in conclusion, I would say, you see, there we have a plug for everything. You have a guy who supplies you with electronics. You have a guy who sorts out your things at the lands office. Please make sure you have a lawyer as a plug. Make sure you always have, someone from the legal space who you can easily call and ask them, by the way, what does this say? What is your opinion on this? That helps a lot. So please make sure you seek legal advice. Then again, in terms of IP and conflict of interest, make sure that the letters you're signing, the contracts you're getting into with your employer, make sure it covers both your interests and the employer's interest. One of the, I call it banana skin issues that usually crops up, especially in the creative industry, is, someone says, this was my innovation. Why do you guys want to use it? And there was a case about one of the South Africa telcos. The guy who invented Please Call Me was paid a lot of money by, I think, Vodafone. Was it Vodafone or Vodacom, the one for South Africa? He said that was my innovation. And of course, then the company never appreciated that, but they took the idea and, it spread. Nowadays, I saw even Airtel there's a way you can tell someone to call you back. So because it was an innovation that maybe in the contract this person had with Vodacom, it was not covered properly, then Vodacom got in trouble and they had to pay him. So always make sure that the contracts you're signing, depending on the nature of your work, it already covers you in terms of whether you'll be actively innovating and creating new IP products, or if your 8 to 5 does not involve that, then just make sure in case such a thing comes up, seek legal advice on that. So maybe before I do a couple of case studies, I'll pause there and just have a few reactions on the conflict as well as IP, discussion on the intellectual property.
Yes, kindly feel free to raise your hand or write in the comment section. And I really like what you said about this IP, this intellectual property. It's a big issue in the creative space. And just as you said in the beginning, that sometimes you think that what you don't know won't hurt you, but it will hurt you. So I think it's important to really understand what the Employment Act says, so that when you're negotiating, you understand.
I like Nelson's comment. He was just agreeing about, when your side hustle picks up, please remember that you're still working with other people and be considerate. We know about people who've lost jobs through lifestyle audit, and it's important for us to be considerate.
Yes, kindly share more comments, raise your hands or write in the comment section.
Okay, I'm sure we'll cover a lot of that when we're doing a recap. So I'll just conclude by giving a few, examples of successful side hustles. And I used these examples with the permission of the people behind them. So I will not be sued for any copyright or infringement because I already spoke to them. So back in 2011, I was working at a company in the capital markets. We had an IT manager, very brilliant guy, very sharp in terms of developing programs and all that. So at one point, we were migrating from the existing ERP system onto a new ERP system. We were going on to Sage. We were moving from an inferior one. So obviously, as procedure goes, they do the RFQs. You get different vendors to quote, to give their scope of work, how long it will take, what are the costs per project, timelines, everything. So I remember at that point, he was called Kevin. So he already had, because IT guys, like I said, they're very mobile. So they can do 8 to 5, and maybe he has another client he's going to sort from 7 to 8 p.m. You have no control over them, really. So we were to spend almost probably 6 to 8 million in terms of, getting the new ERP system into place. So Kevin approached the CEO that time and said, look, I'm actually certified in terms of Sage migration and also training. And I have my own, side gig that I do this for other customers. So I can easily make you save more than 50% of the budget that, of course, the cheapest vendor that time was now the one charging probably 6 to 8 million. So Kevin said, I can easily be able to save you that money, more than half of it. Obviously, we can agree on certain modalities in terms of how we work. And because he also has someone who assists him on the side, he said, my commitment is that this project for migration will not impact my, my day-to-day work. So eventually, the CEO was convinced, and the guy was now in charge of the migration. So I remember what happened during that time. His contract was amended a bit, and he was bonded to the company, where they said, because we're giving you this business, then you cannot leave your job for the next 3 years. And actually, I left him there, but he completed his 3 years. But he made some good money, probably 3 to 4 million in terms of the side hustle. So in a situation like that, again, it was a win-win for both parties. I mean, the company saved close to 60%. For him, he got a bump in his side hustle. I'm not sure about the 3-year bond, whether it was a plus or minus, but at least he was assured of the job for the next 3 years, either way. So it was a win-win for both of them. The next example is, but there's a time I had gone for an interview. So it was in 2018, so in a horticultural farm. Obviously, the person who conducted the interviews, the way you get contacts, you keep in touch. So later on, she transitioned to be a HR manager in a different organization, in an FMCG. Then towards COVID, obviously, FMCGs were hardly hit like any other sector. So they began experiencing, salary delays. And of course, when a company is not doing well, the culture, the environment also becomes very toxic. And, you become disillusioned in terms of growth. So what happened, she started doing online jobs. I think there's a website called Upwork. So she began doing online jobs there. Started off with one, obviously, two. In a couple of months, I think I spoke to her sometime last year. The side hustle is now her main hustle, because when she goes for interviews for full-time jobs, her consideration is, are they going to pay me enough or close to what I'm getting from the various multiple online jobs? So again, that is another example of, successful side hustles. And in this age of digital explosion, again, people are taking up online jobs and eventually they turn out to be their main gigs. The third example, just maybe to drive the point home. So if you pick from those two, for the first scenario, it was a win-win for both employer and employee. For the second scenario, this is someone who dodged a bullet because the moment you start having salary delays, that's a red flag. So eventually you might actually be cut off. So she dodged that bullet and eventually she's built something that is stronger. Third example will probably paint something else that is totally different. So he's one of my directors, very active on LinkedIn. He's one of those um, key voices within the fintech space. I would call him a serial entrepreneur. But what is interesting about him is that he has built himself to be a brand. So when it comes to matters fintech or anything within the digital space, you're likely to find out he's a keynote speaker. He's been invited. That has also landed him, several board appointments. I mean, he sits on my board currently. Recently, he was even appointed onto the board of Old Mutual. So, what I've learned from him is that the moment you build yourself to be a brand, of course, you become very unemployable because there's a lot going on for you, but at the same time, you become very attractive that people, you're the go-to person in terms of shaping opinions in that space. So for that one of the reasons why I picked that as my third example is if you position yourself as a brand, not as Martin, the person, or in this case, maybe Claire, who works at Royal Media. But if you elevate yourself to the place where you become a brand, then you attract a lot of both active and passive side hustles. And in a case like that, no one will ever ask Ali Hussein whether he's conflicted because he sits on the board of Longhorn or Law Africa or Old Mutual. He'll tell you, guys, I'm a brand, you need me. It's the other way around. So when you also build yourself to that brand, and of course that takes a lot of time, but it opens up more avenues in terms of both active and passive side hustles. So those are the three examples, real life examples actually, that I thought I would pick just to drive the point home. And I can see Nelson is asking, you mean Hussein? Yes, Ali Hussein is. Or I asked him for permission to use him as a case example, and he was okay with it. Yeah. So I think I can pause there. Then we can just open it up also to the audience. I'm sure some of them have real life examples that they can share just to drive the point home in terms of the narrative around side hustles.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for that, Martin. I'm really keen to hear from participants their real life examples. And I really like how you concluded on that matter of personal branding. When you become a brand, then you can command a lot of things when it comes to side hustles. It becomes you are being sought after rather than trying to explain, oh, this is my side hustle. You're highly sought after. So it's important to build those personal brands. And there was a question here, I think after you mentioned Upwork from that second example of the one who moved from the FMCGs. Carolyn Mungai is asking, which sites are those for online HR assignments? Asking for a friend. Maybe Nancy can speak to that because you're in the HR field. Maybe which are these sites that somebody who wants to get their side hustles online, because it's really a digital era. We're moving to remote working, as both of you have talked about. Which are those sites? Are there any sites that you can recommend to Caroline Mungai or any other participant here if they're looking for HR assignments? Upwork is one of the sites Martin has put over there. Nancy, is there any other recommendation you can give?
I think I'm not very helpful in that. I've not been doing much of that. Maybe participants can weigh in.
Okay, yeah. If you know of any others, any participant, this is a place where we can help each other and help each other know about other opportunities that might be available. And as that is happening, kindly just raise
I
your hand
see
or continue.
Elizabeth Okumu has raised her hand. Maybe she has more sides to tell us.
Okay, yes. Elizabeth, kindly unmute. I think Elizabeth had raised her hand at the very beginning when we were asking about when Nancy was making her presentation, and I think she didn't put her hand down. Alice Ngatia, kindly unmute and make your comment or question.
Okay, just to share some few insights on Upwork. It's a site where you just create your account and you can be employers post their jobs. You can be able to really bid for those jobs for the ones that you qualify, and then you can start working on them once you're given the bid.
Thanks for sharing on that, and maybe you can expound for us, Alice, because I've I've heard about not just Upwork but some of these online sites that sometimes there's a way it's determined what jobs will come to you. So if you have any tips for people who are looking for work, how do you ensure that you get those jobs coming to you? Because I've had positive experiences, and then I've also had there's another part spectrum where people say that sometimes getting those jobs becomes a whole process. So are there some tips that can make you more likely to get those opportunities?
Maybe the main thing you should design your profile in a way that it will attract the job that you want. If you're in HR, measure your profile to communicate the same to the people who will be sorting for those services. Maybe you can also try to bid for jobs that you qualify for. Don't go bidding for any other job that you will not qualify for you to increase your chances. Yeah, maybe that's what I can say for now.
Thank you for that. I think those are very good points, and I think that applies across the board. As much as we want to bid for jobs, like they say that thing, like even if you don't qualify for 10 things and you qualify for three, apply for it. But if you want to enhance your chances, sometimes look at what the job requires, and if you at least you have 70%, then you can think about it. And really it goes back to what Martin was also saying about personal branding. So make sure that you take time to do your profile well, so that you look attractive for those opportunities. So thanks for that, Alice Ngatia. Anyone else can chime in on that or on any other experience they've had in this side hustle arena? You can raise your hand or write on the comment section.
So as they do that, I'm reading Nancy's comment where she said, I think we have a long way to go in embracing side hustles, and most employees opt to do it under the water. She was asking what my thoughts are around this. Nancy, I fully agree with you. One of the things that, even as, the supervisors have failed at is coming to the reality that, with inflation and everything else, whatever we are paying our employees will never be enough. Okay. So there's that aspect that it's something that is alive within all of us, but like you said, maybe we choose to bury our heads under the carpet, whatever you want to call it. What I would also say is maybe from the HR perspective, we have coaching, but also and maybe this is something Nancy and the other practitioners can think about. Do we need to develop some leadership courses around how to manage people in the post-COVID era? We've heard of our friends who literally had to shift from Nairobi to go up country because everything shut down for them. If that person was to ever get back to their feet, they would never allow themselves to rely on one source of income. Now, imagine that person landing in your office and your very appetite is the as a supervisor who said, you must dedicate all your time here. Fine, they'll do that, but they'll still do things under the water, as you say. So is there a new paradigm shift in how supervisors and managers also need to interact with their employees to encourage, thoughts around entrepreneurship and just having that idea of let's draw the lines. If we agree on certain things and you're delivering on them, then I'll have no business in terms of trying to cross the line to interfere with what you're doing on the sides. So there's also a gap in terms of what leaders expect from their employees vis-a-vis the real situation on the ground. So you're right, most people choose to do it under the water.
Super. Any other comments? You can raise your hands and share experiences or comments before we wrap up. You can share in the comment section or raise or you can raise your hand directly. And as we're waiting for that, I think it's just really critical, really. I think from this whole webinar, what I've gotten is that we can't ignore the reality of the need for side hustles, but we just need to go about it in a smart way and be knowledgeable and not sweep our heads under the sand and think that, what I don't know won't hurt me. You must be aware of your rights and your obligations so that you don't interfere with the main work. So for some people, the side hustle might turn into the main hustle, as Martin gave that example of that lady. But for some, you will still need your main hustle. So keep the main thing, and then make sure you're just doing things in a straight and legal way. I can see a comment over here from Caroline Mungai. Do you change the HR policy to incorporate these side hustles, especially on the conflict of interest clauses? Martin.
So by training, I'm not a HR practitioner. What I can just say is, I think, and I don't know if there's anyone here in the startup world. Those could be the closest in terms of asking, how does their contract look in terms of encouraging innovation? And you see, when you're encouraging innovation, when you say you're encouraging innovation, you should also be ready to deal with the consequences, right? Sometimes we say one thing, but we don't mean it. So if the company's values include innovation, entrepreneurship culture, then when your employee becomes entrepreneurial, it becomes a problem. Then we also need to define, okay, entrepreneurship to what extent? Is it just entrepreneurship in your position as an employee, or because, like someone said, we have a depth of talent and skills which we can't apply all of them in our 8 to 5 workplace. So, like you said, do we include conflict of interest? Do we amend the conflict of interest clauses? Again, it boils down to just the company you're working for. There are those guys who they will not even really bother a lot with what you're doing on the sides, as long as they track you on your KPIs. I have a friend who works at Sandy, and he keeps telling me that for them, the KPIs are very automated. So regardless of what you're doing on the sides, it's actually, you don't even need to wait for your boss to put you on PIP. The system will put you on PIP. So if you decide to put 70% of your time in your side hustle, definitely one will suffer. So again, it boils down to the organizations.
Thanks for that. Nancy, is there anything you'd like to add on to that?
Not quite, because I think, again, as I said, it differs from organization to organization, but definitely one way to make it easier and to just give clear guidance is by defining within the policy. I have come across both types of statements in different organizations I've worked. There are some who have said that for even if it is not a business that is in direct competition, if you're engaging in any other work, you must disclose. That is a policy for that organization. That is in private sector. We do also have sometimes some other sectors. I've also come across an organization, I've worked in an organization where it just talks about any work that is in direct competition. So in that sense, it makes it quite open that someone can do something else, because then what is defined as conflict is what is in direct competition and doesn't require you to make any disclosure. So I think, as he's saying, it would differ from organization to organization. But it's definitely whichever way an organization wants to adopt. And having, there are two sides of the coin, as we say, there are benefits, there are pros. So if you have mitigated some of the danger areas for you as an organization, I think we should have a policy that enables employees, because the organization also is having benefits, it's reaping benefits when staff are engaged in side hustles. We spoke about retention, we spoke about creativity, we spoke about transfer of skills and many other things. Which is beneficial to the organization. And Martin has also shown us that in the case studies that he has presented today. Just make it a win-win.
Thanks for that. Indeed, it's a case-by-case basis. Organizations differ, so you really need to understand which situation you're in. So thanks for that. If there's any other person who wants to make a comment, you can raise your hands as we get ready to wrap up with some closing comments. And I think just for me, what I've gotten out from this is that it's really important to know that side hustles are important, but you must really understand how to go about it. So make sure you are educated. So understand what your rights and obligations are, and then make sure you're not in conflict with your company, and make sure you understand your supervisor, your director. It's really important, that KYC, because we always think about KYC in terms of a client out there. So understand the situation you are in and then act accordingly. I can see James Karundu is asking to speak. Kindly unmute and make your comment. Hello.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is James Karundu. I'm a speaker, coach, mentor, author, and I've had everything actually from the time you opened this. I've been sitting in. I've taken a few notes here and there, and what I find, okay, I just wanted to share one or two quick perspectives again, keeping an eye on the clock. I've had everything you've said, and I've had some case studies that were given of people who, went into side hustles. I want to say that I'm also one of those people, that what I do today was once a side hustle. I transitioned from side hustles to full-time business more than 10 years ago. So I want to say that it is possible. It is possible, and I wanted to share my contribution is, once you've dotted the I's and the T's, as we have been advised here, how do you succeed? So I wanted to just give one or two tips. Is that okay? And also, has everything to do with also what has helped me to succeed. So I'm a mathematician, so I was a lecturer for many years. And today what I do is I run two ventures. One is I'm still a mathematician, so I run a program called Common Math and English. I run two study centers, which were once my side hustles. Now I run them full time. The other thing that I run is called Passion Biz Academy. And in Passion Biz Academy, I help people to take the same journey, which is a journey I'm hearing being talked of here. I help people with that transition. So what helped me, which is what I help people to do, is that I had a coach. And I wanted to say that for you to succeed, you need hand-holding, you need guidance. I had the conversation of having a lawyer on speed dial, but I want to say what you need is a coach or a mentor on speed dial, or somebody to walk with you. Because you need somebody who has walked that journey and somebody who is living it. You see, because a lot of things you say there's a theoretical element, but what you need is ground. How do you actually do this? And so that's the work I do, by the way. I've even written an ebook here, actually on side hustles, that I'm actually about to release soon. But the point there is this: that in terms of succeeding, if you want to succeed, narrow it down. Narrow it down. The answer is in narrowing it down. Find a niche. And if you don't know where to start, target one person and follow through. And then the other one is just learn to trust yourself. And also, I had people talking about where to find work, where opportunities are. I can give you one wide open opportunity. If you're wondering what to do with the idle capacity you have, and you've dotted all the I's and the T's, the easiest way to make money in a side hustle is teach someone something. Teach someone something. That could be the beginning point for almost anyone who is listening to this. There's something you know that somebody else doesn't know. Find a way of teaching them, and that could be the beginning of a side hustle. And that was my story too. I was a mathematician. I was doing tuitions, going to people's houses, and then I discovered a smarter way, which is to run a franchise. And I got into it, and I've never looked back 20 years later. I've run my franchise for more than 20 years. So again, the working smart scenario. So teach someone something. Even in my coaching and mentorship, it is teach someone something. Back to your organizers, and thank you for the opportunity for me to share the practical side of side hustle gone right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, James. It's a very inspiring journey over there. A mathematician, you're still a mathematician, but now you're teaching others how to go about it, and you have your own center. And kudos to you for that, and for the book that you're authoring. That's awesome, and that's what also this platform is about. Plug your business in there. Tell us about your journeys. It's really inspiring. So thank you for that. And is there anyone else who has a comment or wants to share their experience before we bring it to a close? If you can just raise your hand so that we can give you an opportunity. We don't want you to miss the opportunity to share your experience before we give this session a close. Okay, if there's no other comment, I'm sure people will still keep the comments coming in, but that has been a very enlightening conversation, really, a very enlightening one. I have learned a thing or two, and the importance of really understanding the laws, the importance of a lawyer, and as James also said, the importance of a coach. So I have been your moderator. I'm Claire Munde, and if you want to interact with me, you can find me on social media, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at Claire Dudu. That is at CLAIREDUIDEU. I will leave it on the comment section, and I am open to discussing with you anything to do with digital media, anything to do with moderation and emceeing and whatnot. So at this point, I would like to invite Richard Jellican. I saw him on the call just to give us a word or two, and then I will also hand over to Hosea Buliba to give us a word or two, and then we can close. So Richard, if you can take over the floor, this is your chance. Richard Magoma, I think I saw you on the call a few minutes ago. Yes,
thank you, Claire.
Hello.
How are you, Claire?
How are you?
How are you, Claire? How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Karibu
Thank you very
sana.
much for a wonderful. Thank you very much. I've just come from a budget meeting that has taken a bit of time. That is why I wasn't available. Thank you very much, Wafula. Thank you very much, Nancy. I have learned awareness. I came to the last segment of the discussion, situational awareness, that you cannot be able to make legal errors or strategic errors. But I can tell you for free, tomorrow we are meeting with James. There's a book launch. We'll be together. It is because of what he does. Okay. Personally, I'll say that that's hustles that cannot give you a lot of anxiety. Like, for example, if you are a choir member, you're selling your voice. If you can be able to conduct, so some hustles are really easy. It is the fear that we have. If you're a very good choir member, if you've got a, for example, like me, I sell and it has got conflict with it has got no conflict with anybody. So it is a question of courage. What James has called self-belief that we need. So thank you, Claire. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Martin. And of course, my good friend, Jose, who is behind there. Thank you very much. God bless you. Enjoy your nights.
Thanks so much for that comment, Richard. And there's someone in the comment section, Irene Karanja, is asking, James, where can you be found or contacted on coaching? Maybe you can just comment on the comment section and then Irene can reach out to you. And people just share your contacts on the comment section. We can all network. It's also a networking session. And as we're doing that, I will now hand over to Hosea. Kindly take the mic.
Thank you very much, Claire. I've been here following very keenly. I've also learned a lot. Thank you very much for moderating the session very well. Thank you, Nancy, for your time and for your expert knowledge. Thank you, Martin. I think I've learned a lot. I've learned about the loopholes that we will be able to, we should be able to navigate, especially when it comes to conflict of interest. It brings a lot of question, especially when you talk of resources meant for your employer being used for your side hustle. I think there's quite a thin line, and sometimes people don't even think about it. What I took out of it is, as much as we are saying that we shouldn't, we may be taking the employer's time when we are engaging in side hustles. What about things like studying, whereby someone is studying at work? That is still conflicting in terms of what they're supposed to deliver or not. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if we are supposed to find a win-win for both employer and employee, first of all, for the bit of the employer, they need to find a way of ensuring that they are able to track performance and clearly track performance of the employees so that it's very clear. Like from the example Martin gave, that it's the system that is giving you PIP. So it's up to you to see how you're navigating around and ensuring that you're not affecting the employer's work. And now on your end, also as the employee, the truth is you need to find something extra to do. And whether or not it's whether or not you disclose it, it's still there. We know of very many people. I noticed the trend that since 2020, everyone is selling something. Everyone is selling something, whether it's Itenge, whether it's what. So I think in a blessing in disguise, because people realize, okay, we need to think of life after work. And you need to find a way to synchronize the two so that you don't affect either, because all of them are important. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the attendees and having this wonderful session and interacting. It was a very engaging session. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And we'll be able to send you the certificates for participation in this session and also the recording. So I saw a question. So or dual. So we'll be able to send that into your to your email. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Hosea. And I'd like to bring this webinar to a close. I'd like to thank you so much, Nancy Mwabili, Martin Wafula. Thank you, Hosea Buliba. Thank you, Richard Magoma. This has been such an impactful session. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you for your participation, your very active participation. I think we are leaving this webinar equipped. So when we are going for our side hustles, we know how to navigate, how to do them in a legal way, how to approach our directors or supervisors and make sure that everything is smooth so that we're not doing things under the carpet. We can do it and still perform at our main jobs. And if it turns out to be that your side hustle becomes your main job, good for you. You grow and grow. So thank you for this and have a good evening. We will have more of these webinars. And I just want to wish you a very good evening and see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for everybody. Thank you, Elizabeth. I can see you. Caroline, thank you. Irene, James.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening.
You too as well.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
and good night.
Irene Karanja. Nelson, the mathematician, I can see Jacqueline. Bernard, my friend Kinyanjui, thank you very much. Veronica. Alice Ngatia, thank you.
Jellican, how are you?
How are you, Bana? We have just finished some budget discussion, right? Like 30 minutes ago. Yeah.
We have
But
been.
I got a, I hope you have enjoyed.
It was a.
Claire,
It was
thank you
a
very
great one.
much.
It was a great one.
Yeah, we've learned
And
a lot.
I'm set until the end.
Yeah, we let's meet. Let's meet at the other end also. So I'll join you shortly. Claire, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. How was your day?
It was good.